Hi. Just bring it. We're slightly apart because I'm actually going to interview John. No, I'm
Yes,
Lou.
we should be sitting.
Yes, we can't do that because we're sitting at our kitchen
bit awkward,
table.
yeah.
And this is John. We're from Bottled Up, and we hope that you're finding out about our program and coming and joining us. But I haven't rehearsed this. I want to talk to you about something, and I want to come at it cold.
Yeah.
Because I know.
Don't know what she's going to ask me.
No.
So.
Yes. Why do you keep wearing red when it doesn't suit you?
I
just thought that throw that in.
I thought you did.
I love to put people that I interview at ease,
Yes.
and I just
thought, that's very nice of you. Yeah.
No, seriously.
Okay, excuse me while I go and change.
Okay.
This is a program of change.
Yes, it is. Sorry, this is us learning around, but this is us. Okay, and so we're just trying to be ourselves. But I'm interested in the 12-step program because I know the 12-step program was enormously important to you. So just tell us about that. Why was it important to you, and how often did you go?
Right. First time I went to AA, to the 12-step program, I have to say that I didn't want to be there. My wife had basically lifted the phone, talked to AA, and stuck the phone in my hand, said speak, and somebody picked me up and took me there. And I sat there and I thought, losers. I'm nothing like this, and celebrated in the pub on the way home.
So you felt manipulated to go?
Absolutely. I felt as if I'd been frog marched, you know. I went a few times, didn't like it at all. I really didn't like it. I didn't like the people at it. I didn't like being there. I didn't like the fact that I was sitting there being identified with these losers. Until eventually I really needed it, and when I really needed it, then I started to look at it. I started to look at the program, and I became a bit more open-minded than I had been, because previously I was totally closed.
I'm not going to go into John's testimony about it. We'll find it. But you had a real meltdown, weren't you? You given 6 months to live, and really you had liver damage and brain damage, and so presumably at that point then AA became a more needed option.
There were I was offered two programs at the same time. I was offered AA, you know, so I went back to AA, but there was also another program which was more medical, and I attended both for a while until eventually I had to make a choice. Okay. And I chose AA.
Okay. And at that point it became really helpful.
Incredibly helpful. I can honestly say hand in heart that I probably would not be sitting here today if it wasn't for Alcoholics Anonymous. No. You know, I can honestly say that.
Okay. And if you're coming to join us, and you come from a 12-step program and it means a lot to you, I want you to hear this, because it's been very important in him getting sober. Yep. You then ran groups, didn't you, for a long time?
Yes, you don't run groups. You are sort of, you know, you're part of a group, you know, and then you
facilitate them, do you? Or
well, actually, groups are, everybody's there as a mutual help, but that's the theory. It doesn't really work out that way, you know, and because somebody has to sort of take the lead, and you know, and very often I took the lead. Okay. Yes, so. To some extent, you're right, but in the language of AA, no, you don't run groups. That would make it much more organised, etc. You know, and they don't like that.
Okay, so what I want to know is, because we are about, society is about empowerment, but actually the first step of AA appears to contradict that. Can you remember that? I know it's a while since you've been the first step. Yeah,
I don't go to AA these days, you know, and I haven't been for quite a long time, but I went for, you know, many years.
And you've been over 35 years sober now, haven't you? So.
Yeah, I am 37 years sober in this year, you know. But I went to AA probably for the first 25, you know.
So in that case, the first step.
The first step is admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable.
Okay. So, powerlessness.
Powerlessness.
Yeah.
Can I just say that I really owe my life, I think, to AA, but I don't agree with everything that AA says. I don't take it all in hook, line and sinker. I think that Bill Wilson, who was the guy who wrote the big book and who wrote subsequent other books and was one of the authors of AA with him and Dr. Bob, I think I tremendous admiration for him. I think he's a great social architect. However, a lot of this stuff was written in 1937, you know. And if I went into my GP with some kind of complaint and he took down a textbook from 1937 and said, okay, let's see what's wrong with you, I would run, you know. And nothing has really been updated since then. It's become almost like the Bible and tablets of stone. Nothing changes. Lots of stuff changes, but people don't change, and the program is still relevant, but some of the aspects of what they believe, I think, is slightly, you know, iffy. And does not agree with medical science today.
Okay, right. Now, what about somebody who's listening to this, for whom the 12 Steps program has been their lifeline, might be finding that a bit threatening? What would you say to reassure them at this point?
I found it very threatening because I was doing a PhD and I was, you know, I was doing research. I was a scientist, and on the one hand, I'm looking at the science and I'm looking at AA, and I'm thinking, I have problems here, you know, because what I am finding out does not agree with what is saving my life, so to speak. Now, what I will say about it is the medical information, as far as AA is concerned, has moved on enormously. You know, and in the real world, it's moved hugely. The internal information, you know, the psychological, the spiritual aspects of it, that's not really changed that much, you know. We've got slightly different vocabulary, but it means the same thing. And I used to say to my students, because I taught lots. I taught at university. I taught GPs, psychologists about alcohol and drugs. And what I used to say to them is it's probably the best CBT program in the world. And it still is. You know, if you follow it, you will get sober. It's some of the other beliefs, that the kind of peripheral stuff that, you know, take that with a
I think that's what you said is really, really important. And if you're listening to this, hear that, because you can incorporate empowerment into your life without losing what is really, really important to you. In fact, actually taking the step to be able to take from that program what has really, really helped you, but to bring other things in as well. Otherwise, it's become a kind of a religion, hasn't it? Yeah,
I mean, if you look at the 12-step program, then what you have is you have a statement of the problem, then you have a statement of the solution, then you sort of how to change that, you know, and it's about changing what's happening inside you, but it's also about, you know, altering your position in the world by going and apologising to people, making amends, etc. And then there is the maintenance steps after that. And part of that is a spiritual program, which is about prayer and it's about meditation, and it's also about giving it away. So these aspects of the program, they still work. There is no doubt about it. They work.
I have to say, actually, as a counsellor, if I start working with someone who's been through a 12-step program, you can tell by the measure of self-awareness, the ability to own stuff, the ability to be able to then make amends when you see it. What it does to the psyche, I think, is really commendable, and I really notice it. I can pretty well tell in one session if they've been put through the program. So hear us here. We are great admirers of it, but we also believe we need to start talking about empowerment and what that means. So in what way is that statement true?
Okay. As a drinker, I had power over whether I drank or I didn't drink until I drank.
Okay. Yeah.
There's an old saying, I've probably said it a few times in these videos, but it doesn't matter, it still holds true, you know, and it's the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes the man.
Okay.
You know?
That's a good way of putting it.
If we look at what that actually means, what it actually means is that I always had a choice before I picked up a drink, whether I picked up the drink or not. It was my choice. I wasn't compelled to pick up the drink. I might have had a lot of reasons to pick up the drink, and I might have felt cravings to pick up the drink, but it's still in all, cravings pass. And that's, again, a scientific fact. Cravings take about 20 minutes and then they recede again. And if you give in to them, then the next time you have a craving, it'll take about 20 minutes and then it'll recede again. If you actually fight the craving, then the next time it might take it 19 minutes.
I'm going to bring you back to my question here. Yeah.
So you have, what I'm saying is you may have the craving, but the craving itself is not compulsory to pick up a drink.
Right, but...
So you have power at that point.
Yeah, you're talking about the bit that I want you to talk about in a minute, if you don't mind.
Sorry.
I want to say, in what way is the powerlessness true in the First Step program? I suppose what I'm saying is, does it really say, I can't do this alone, I need your help and I need any spiritual help that is out there? Is that what that powerlessness is really all about?
That's one definition of it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, what most people see as a definition is that alcohol is a power in itself, and that alcohol compels you because you are different from everybody else in the world because you are an alcoholic. And being an alcoholic means that you are different, your relationship with alcohol is different, and that you do not have any power to stop yourself drinking.
Okay. So it's a cry for help then, really, that first step?
No, it's a definition of the problem.
Okay. Right, the definition of what? Is it also a cry for help?
Well, you could call it a cry for help, but I think the cry for help comes from the definition rather than...
So I think the professor would call it that, and Lou would call it a cry for help. So there is a bit of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
My point here is,
Yes.
is in that first step, you can still believe in empowerment, but there is something really very real that goes on in that first step, in the 12-step program.
Today, I am over 36 years sober. Haven't picked up a drink, haven't felt like a drink, don't want a drink. I've had drinks sat in front of me because people are well-meaning, and I haven't picked it up. Why? Because I have the power to resist it. When I was drinking, I had the power to resist picking up a drink. But once I picked up the drink, then that power left. The power has left the building. Why? All sorts of reasons. Now, one of the reasons is the fact that, alcohol is a psychoactive drug, and therefore it clouds my brain, and all these reasons I have for not drinking, all of a sudden fade away because alcohol is now clouding my brain. And all I can think about is the next drink. I used to say that, as far as I was concerned, that the effect that I was looking for was always in the next drink. And therefore I wasn't looking at the drink that was in front of me, I was looking at the next one in the one after that. And it's ironic because AA talks about a day at a time, and I never lived more than a day at a time than when I was drinking. Because tomorrow, who cares about tomorrow? Today is what matters. This drink is what matters. This is it here and now.
And this is the powerlessness that you were talking about.
That's the powerlessness. When I pick up a drink, yes, there is a very good argument that I am then powerless over alcohol. Now, some people would, some scientists would say, no, you're not powerless, but you'd certainly have diminished power over it, And what we say is that you have power until you pick up a drink, So once you pick up a drink, you've given your power away,
Okay, now, if you're listening to this and you've done the 12-step program, I suppose if I had 12 people to interview, I suspect that everybody would play something slightly different. But you are talking about a point in time when you own that this situation has got out of control.
Yeah.
And it's now beyond what seems to be beyond your control.
Yes. I mean, the first step is, admitted we are powerless over alcohol. First part. There's two parts to this, and a lot of people don't seem to realise this. Admitted we are powerless over alcohol, and that our lives have become unmanageable. If I was to rewrite this program again, I would turn them around. My life is unmanageable. and I'm powerless over alcohol. Why? Because I drank to manage my life.
Okay, yeah, I get that.
My life became unmanageable, I'll grant you that, but my life was unmanageable before I drank as well, you know. And many people come into, become heavy drinkers for the simple reason they're trying to manage something that's going on inside them. People with psychosis very often use other psychoactive drugs, whether it be marijuana or whether it be alcohol, So that was my medicine for my life, So that, does that help?
It does, yes. I think the other thing that's coming into my mind is kind of the image of these being stepping stones across a river. And I suppose in terms of updating, we've discovered actually you could put kind of a bridge there and put a bit of a road there. But there are all ways to overcome the problem of alcohol and how it's made a terrible kind of rift in our lives. Okay.
The great thing about a 12-step program is which is that it doesn't just deal with alcohol. It then goes on, and this is why I'm talking about the unmanageability, it then goes on to start and deal with some of this unmanageability. It goes on to deal with the man that takes the drink. We've dealt with the drink taking a drink because we're not picking up the drink, but we then have to deal with the man who takes the drink, because many people stop drinking, but the relapse rate is very high, And that's what you have to start and deal with. You have to start and deal with who am I, what am I,
So it would be fair to say then that though it appears to say you have to say you're powerless, from then on in, the whole STEP program gives you power and power and power and power.
Yes. And again, that's when they talk about the higher power. The higher power is the what removes the issue, what removes the craving.
And I think the word higher power has been interpreted in many ways and probably will continue to be so.
Yes.
And it can be a better way if you don't want to bring spirituality into it. There are ways in which you can have a better way. Now, I don't know the 12-step program very well, and that might have shown you that kind of statement. But I'm more really about powerlessness and empowerment.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about empowerment for you in terms of you deal with drinkers and you deal with families of drinkers.
Yeah.
Okay, now where does empowerment come into your therapy?
Well, first of all, if people, to look at this completely logically, then if people were completely powerless over alcohol, then, alcoholism would be a death sentence for everybody, because how could it ever recover? Now, to some extent, that is part of the reason why the AA appealed to the higher power. That I can't do it, a higher power can do it, and therefore I put my hands in a higher power, and that's it. And it's great because I have to say I did that incredibly reluctly, but I did it. But as you say, not everybody looks at higher power in terms of a god, etc. But if we are looking at sort of power, then we have to give people the power to resist the drink in the first place. As I talked about my in another video, I talked about what I was like when I stopped drinking and then binged, because there would be this idea would come into my head: one drink won't hurt, it'll be okay, I know what to look for this time, ba-bum, and then off I went again.
Yeah.
And it's resisting that. And that's one of the things that we do with people who come to see us now. We try and put a barrier between us and them, and it's that barrier that gives them the power. It's a barrier to resist. That's why I was talking about how long
barrier between us and the drink.
Between them and them and the drink.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I? Yeah. That's why I was talking about how long cravings last.
That's a really interesting bit of information. I would find that so helpful if I was trying to give up drink.
Cravings.
Know how long I've got to sit with it and know that it's going to end. That's a really important bit of information.
Yeah, and every single drug has got a half-life and a craving life, and once we know what that is, then Yeah.
And there's an example of empowerment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That is empowerment. For the families, then, you know, if we look at the 12-step program for families, which again was created back in, I think it was 1940, it might have been 39 or 40 before the family groups emerged. And again, what they did was they took the 12-step program and they adapted it slightly for families. And what they talk about again is you're powerless to change the drinker. And we don't believe that.
No, we don't.
And the reason we don't believe that is because people do change. Now, if you were powerless to change a drinker, then we might as well close down all the treatment agencies today. Pointless. You know, they don't work. You know, why do they not work? Because they're powerless. End of story. Drinkers change because of the parameters, which is the thing, you know, the things that support the drinking. Once they start to change, then the drinkers change. The drinkers change in many, many ways. My drinking career is I started in quite nice pubs. I ended up in really sort of grotty pubs. Why? Because I stood out like a sore thumb in the nice pubs, and people looked at me and I felt ashamed of it. Therefore I moved to a pub that they didn't stand out. Then they started looking at me and down and down and down. You know?
Yeah.
So I am adapting to my surroundings. Therefore, you know, I'm exercising change.
Yes.
You know, my surroundings are changing me, and that's what we talk about within the program of Bottled Up. The surroundings start to change the drinker, and then we talk about the dance. At the moment, the drinker is leading the dance, but if the partner then starts to lead the dance, then things start to change. And we give them power. We give them power to change the situation, not necessarily to change the drinking, but to change the situation surrounding the drinking. And by changing that, very often the drinking changes. And that's why we say, yes, we have empowerment.
And you know, we cannot guarantee outcomes because every situation, every relationship is different.
We wish we could.
Yeah, we wish we could. But what we can do is we can remove the disempowering things, many of which are intuitive, many of which make sense in a loving relationship, but not with alcohol.
But the thing is, if you tell somebody that you are powerless, and you really and they start to believe they're powerless, why would they try and change anything? It's pointless, you know. We know it's pointless. Why? Because we're told we're powerless, and if we're told we're powerless, then we won't do it, and therefore nothing will happen, and therefore, you know.
And this is where we know these things now. I mean, we know a lot more about psychology.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so we know that these things are true.
We have what's known in psychology as the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
You know, if you a lot of that actually came from education. If you tell a kid that he's rubbish, then they turn out rubbish. Then you go, "Told you so." Now, well, why did that happen? If you tell somebody that they're powerless to change their drinker, and you know, and their drinker doesn't change, then self-fulfilling prophecy. You know. But if you tell them that, yes, you know, if you do this, and if you do that, you do the next thing, the situation will change, then you are empowering them. And when you empower somebody, again, we talked about this in our previous video, that for the partners of drinkers, there's a high rates of anxiety and depression. And if you give them that bit of power, if you empower them, then those rates of anxiety and power reduce. And that's what we try to do in Bottled Up.
Okay, so I hope that helps, because it does feel at first as if those two things collide. They don't collide. They're just different aspects. They're different ways of describing two very real situations that people are in.
It's like the old sort of, analogy that they use with the elephant in the room and the blind person. You know, one person sees the tail, another sees the trunk. So, you know, and we're describing different bits of the elephant.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, so I hope that is both interesting, informative, but also inspiring in terms of that you know, and listen to the program, because we've tried as much as possible to look at the disempowering that goes on and the empowerment that does go on, to give you some steps. And remember, it is actually when you're changing this situation, one step, one day at a time.
And again, you know, we may talk about empowerment. We may say, you know, this is where we disagree with Al-Anon, but and you know, we disagree with AA, but you know, we have great admiration for both.
Absolutely.
You know, and you know, and we love the work that they do, but you know, but we just do things in a slightly different way.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you
welcome.
for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.